Yeah, so I'm a gardener. I did a training 3 years for fruit gardener. It's kind of a dual training. And afterwards, I did a lot of stuff, and now I ended up to do like freelance gardening. And last year, I got into Blender. I think I do Blender now for 8 months or something like that. And yeah, so uh, I started in November to make some blends, and because it was easy for me to get some ideas, because I know a lot of plants, and I think that's something I can benefit from my life as a gardener, and it's yeah. And after November, I did some different stuff, and I did Skype January, and now I revisited my old notes, and this was the most simple and most ugly tree, and I picked this one to rework it and completely overhaul it. Before it was a huge abomination of curve to points and then proximity to a mesh, and everything was, it worked, but it don't work as good as now. And it was quite a process, and I had some help by Shmoo from the server here, and now I think it works quite nice. It's a bit of a drawing tool which lets you feel a little bit like Bob Rose, like it's spawning instantly flowers when you just make a stroke, and that's a pretty nice outcome, I think. But I don't know how it's. I mean, I can use everything because I made it, but I'm not so sure if it's a nice tool for other people as well. That's why I'm here.
That's why you're here. Okay. That's very cool. I love how has been a collaboration in the server. And unfortunately, for those who were in the live streams, I actually had my microphone on mute. So my big ass introduction was lost, unfortunately. But oh well. But thanks for giving me the summary of this. So I just had a quick look at your scene just yesterday and a little bit the day before. Had a look of how it worked. And basically, if you go into the edit mode, you have a bunch of curves, and you practically, if you're in the drawing mode, which is this one here, the draw mode, and you draw from a point and up, it draws a flower, like gratuitous, like freely, you know, you can just draw flowers everywhere. The same is true with the blades of grass as well. So for example, if you have, whoops, wrong scene. If you have the leaf clusters as well, you can also go into the drawing mode and you can draw clusters of leaves on the ground. So it's kind of a really cool setup to quickly set up a nice flower garden here. So you mentioned earlier this has a scientific name of flowers. I didn't quite catch the name. Why were you inspired to use this particular flower type with your geometry notes?
It's the snowdrop, which is called Galanthus nivalis, and it grows right now outside, so I had some real life reference, which is pretty handy.
Wow, and they come out in the spring. Is this right?
Yes, it's some spring flower. They grow from a bulb and then flower pretty early in the spring.
Wow, that's beautiful. So nice. So I noticed you also generated the bulbs on some of these flowers. That's really cool.
I think all should have the bulbs. The other ones are just below zero.
Okay. So to get the bulb, oh, they all do, yeah. Look, here they are. So it's just the drawing that I have of the ground. Like if I pull the ground back, you can see the bulbs. Wow. This is incredible. To be honest, I've never had a very good close-up. I know Arundel has done a number of these types of projects before, but to be honest, I haven't created procedural geometry like this before. So, would you like to walk us through the parameters of your two trees? Because if we take a look, you have two groups. One is the leaf cluster group, and the other one's called the snowdrop. So the leaf cluster group takes a guide input, also has a single leaf guide input that you have hidden, and then you have the actual generated geometry. And in the snowdrop group, you have the flower curve, and then you have the actual generated geometry. So should we take a look at the parameters that we have here of your snowdrops?
Sure.
All right, let's zoom in, nice and big. So what do we have here? We've got individual inputs. We have another group of scaling. We have another group for spline, another group for textures, and you all generate this inside the tree. So let's just do a quick demo, I suppose. So we're looking at the flowers here. And just get rid of the HDRI. So basically, okay, so you have 3D organs. What does 3D organs mean?
When you go into wireframe, you see it.
Okay, let's go.
It's switches between 2D and 3D version of the petal and leaves, not the round things, but the flat things.
All right, for super close-ups instead of far away. So it's kind of like a LOD almost. And what does this use curve input mean?
That's in the node editor. I don't know if it's working right now, but if you have like scattered Bezier curves, you can use just them, and it works as well.
Scattered Bezier curves. Alright, so it's like if we were using a scattering or painting the scattering of the Bezier curves, it would make it gather the scattered points.
Yeah, it's just for having a geometry input on the node.
Okay. So now we have individual points. Currently, it is taking a collection with little...
And these collections are kind of, this should be a divider, because there's nothing to really make some visual division between the...
I use the string output for this one usually instead of collections, because then there's no icon. It's just a gray box. And you can put the title here. The string group input. Right, so we have flower scale from here. Oh, okay, cool. That's very nice. In all of the axes. We've got the petal angle. So this opens and closes the flower, right?
Yes. I tried a lot to make it a bit randomized and individual, but somehow I didn't manage. But I think it should work someday.
Okay. Eventually. I mean, there's a lot of things to think about. We also have the disable inner flower. So what does this mean? There's like
there's the when you look from beneath, there is this how is it called, gynoeceum, and the other inner organs where the bee goes to. And actually you can't really see them if you don't make a render from beneath or have another angle of the flower.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. Oh yeah, I see it.
Should be disabled now. So if you enable it.
Enable it. There it is. These are called the pistils, I think. Pistils? Of the flower. Wow, that's beautiful. Look at that. Very nice.
Yeah, but usually you wouldn't see it, and I think it's good to be able to disable it for not
particular renders. Yeah, exactly. If you had flowers that were facing upwards or outwards, then yes, you'll be showing the pistils of the actual flower as well. But these are pointing downwards, so it's very hard to get the camera down there. Unless you were like an ant or a fairy or something. Okay, cool. So then we have the upper leaf scale. So this was something that kind of confused me a little bit. I noticed that each flower has an extra leaf or sheath on top of the flowers. This was basically this is part of the design of the flower, right?
Yeah, it's also kind of the most tricky part of the flower. It's kind of a bit like an onion. So there is this outer stem and then this inner stem where the flower comes from grows out of this outer stem. And so you always have this one kind of random leaf up there. And so I just made one kind of random leaf up there too. It's more like an artistic solution than really botanical correct.
Botanically correct. It's difficult to get things botanically correct when you have to kind of fake it, but that's the nature of 3D, right? All right, somebody's selling bananas in my street. Okay, cool. So that's really cool. We also have a leaf scale of all the, like with the upper leaf, we have the leaf scale in general, which are these ones here. We also got the leaf position. We also have the leaf rotation deviation. So this is where things become randomized in the rotation. And we also got the stem radius, which is very cool. What I like is that you have two types of radius on the curves that you generated. You have like the main thickness, and then you have the flower thickness above the actual leaf, which I think is very cool. It's quite well done. And then you have the bulb scale, which is the bulb on the ground, and you can turn the bulbs off or on. And then you have the general master scale. So this is something that confused me a little bit. What is the difference between a fixed scale and master scale?
If you use fixed scale, you have this controls beneath, and if it's not fixed scale, it uses the spline length. So the longer the curve you draw, the thicker, the bigger it gets.
Right, so the bigger the curve, the thicker it gets, the shorter the curve, the thinner it gets if it's off. And if I use fixed scale, I turn it on, then I have actual control on all of the curves with some deviation, random deviation and scale. Okay, now I understand. I wish geometry nodes had booleans inside their interface, because like using a slider for a boolean instead of a checkbox is really unintuitive, right?
Yes, that's true. It looks so nice as a node, but in the modifier stack, it's not really
Yeah, it's not.
an eye charm.
They also need to add in something for labels and collapsing and uncollapsing node groups. So for example, if I'm in like a node group here, let's find one where I have subcollapsible views. Here we go. So for example, we should have the ability to be able to collapse groups of properties as well. That would be lovely. Like the camera lock that I have here in this panel in the top right. One day, we'll see. I don't know how hard that would be to code, because nodes would have to have that feature coded in. Okay, so now we have this concept called start handle Z and end handle Z. So what does this mean? What's it doing exactly?
That's kind of where the magic happens. So it's pretty agnostic about the curve you draw. You could draw just a wild curve, and it only resembles the end positions, the end handles.
Now okay.
The curve you draw just samples the positions, and there with these handles you do the handles. Yes.
So it takes the end point and start point of the curves, and it kind of creates another curve, I guess you could say, or an interpolation based on a tangent, I guess you could say.
I think it just I sample it down to 2 points, and then I set these 2 points.
All right,
So all the input you get is from the start and the end point. The things in the middle are kind of not doing anything.
Yeah, I see. So it's taking the end point and the start point of any curve, doesn't matter if I have all the middle points, and it creates a new sample. Okay, it's very interesting. So this use count, what does the use count toggle do?
It switches between length and count for the resampling of the curve, because when you have length, sometimes it's the indices are not so consistent like when you use count.
Okay. So I've upped the count by quite a bit. This is kind of like the resolution, I suppose.
Yeah, it's also the resolution.
Oh, that's cool. It's very nice. That's nice. Okay, and this length, this is the length of similar to the resolution length.
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay, that's nice to lower the resolution for like renders from far away. And then we have the profile. This is the kind of like the cylinder, I guess you could say, the cylinder resolution of the stem. And
Exactly.
the seed of the leaves. And then we have the bevel radius. The bevel radius would be when I have solid leaves. Is this correct?
When you have, somehow it's not working, but actually on this inner petal there is like a green dot, and I'm not sure, it needs to be in cycles. I'm not sure if anything with the attributes is wrong because it's not
Oh, yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. This would be cycle. I'm in Eevee at the moment for the sake of the stream.
Yes, and because I just wanted to have these inputs outside, so if I would make a 1 meter big flower, it would be horribly off, and so I quickly have these inputs to adjust. I think it might work with a lot of time to make it really automatic, that it scales with the scaling, but I think in this case just like free handles are more easy
Yeah, you're
for
right.
me.
Anyway, well done. This is impressive. So, should we take an adventure into? Oh, another thing I noticed is that when you're using on top of the actual cluster of flowers, you also created another tree for the actual leaves, which I thought was very interesting. You also created another tree which has another concept of the leaves and how you generate the leaves. But how you do this is by drawing onto the ground, right? So if I'm in edit mode and I draw on the ground, for example, and it starts like, doesn't matter where I draw, like the beginning or the end, I'm drawing more leaves, but based
And
on the
this
base.
one only takes the first point, so you just have to click and then
Click,
something
click,
spawns.
click, click. Gotcha. Interesting. So it's kind of like a stripped down version of the flower, I guess. How did you plan this?
I At the total bottom of the node there is a stripped down version of the flower. Uh, I have this as a boolean, and it uses a total different tree, but the actual scattering thing is, I wanted to draw something to have some quick variations of like leaf patterns, and I just instance on circles, and then I instance circles on the curve, and then I instance curves again on these circles.
Okay. I guess we can go into like a deeper dive into the actual node tree if you want. So let's take a look. So here I'm looking at the node tree for the leaf cluster. You mentioned you're dividing the spline input into two, and then you're cluster curving the mesh. Just reading the node group titles. And then there's your plants. Oh, here's a quick little tip with your node trees to keep them clean. So typically, you notice that when you go into the add menu and you go into the group, you see all these groups here. If you don't want to see all of them as a list, so for example, to save them as an asset in the future, what you can do is in the name of the group that you don't want listed, you can add a period, and this will hide it from the list. So now this node group is just a normal node group that's no longer listed in the actual list that you can add from other node trees. So that's a little, just add a little period, and then like, so for example, you might have a random like this bend. Maybe you don't want this bend to be used elsewhere, so you can hide it by pressing the period, and it's no longer inside the list here. Just to keep your your add node trees nice and clean. Very interesting. I think the one I can understand the best. I've noticed that you use this base mesh generation by single merge bud. This node tree you use often. What does this node tree do, or this node group do, the base mesh generation?
It's just a usual curve to mesh with a cube for the three-dimensional version and a grid for the two-dimensional version. And then setting the radius and controlling with a float curve, which is outside of the group. That's kind of a pity as well. And yeah, why do I resample there? I resample there also.
You
Like
resample there
all the stuff in one tree.
Gotcha, yeah. I see. I'd have to like really sit down and take a close look. So what are your, with these flowers, then now that you have designed these tools and things, what are your plans? What are your next steps? What do you plan to do with this piece?
My next step is to make some other spring flowers, like, is it called narcissus? Like the one which the narcissist is called after.
Oh, really?
And these yellow Easter flowers, I don't know how they call it in English. And they're pretty similar, so I think I can just tweak the node tree and have them, and then make some other spring flowers which use kind of the same organs, so I just have to tweak the tree, and then I should have a few more. Hopefully, that's kind of the goal.
Okay, cool. Oh, concerning materials on the flowers, that's one thing I haven't actually looked at. Are you defining the UVs with your curves as well?
It's all procedural and some noise and no UVs.
Okay. So you're using, oh whoops, this is the world shader. Let's go to the object shader. So you're using the position of the geometry with some 3D noise. There's a color ramp onto the hue, and you're mapping the range to get the roughness. You're feeding the same noise texture into the bump, and you're using the color with a little bit of color correction into the color of your translucency and subsurface scattering, and you're mixing these two shaders together with the BSDF with some subsurface scattering as well to create your flower. So you're not actually using generated UV space, you're just using 3D noise texture, correct?
Yes.
Gotcha. All
I
right.
mean,
You mentioned earlier, like in the chat when we were talking closer, that sometimes you're not sure when you're finishing your node trees. Like you feel like you're a bit of a perfectionist. In your mind, what do you think needs to be worked on a bit more? What needs more polish? And also, what would be your consideration to consider it done? Or are you just ready to work on the next flowers?
I'm not sure, but I think it's right now it's working pretty well and
Yeah.
usable. It should get some individual random petal rotation and maybe nice bending wind animation.
Wind
and
animation. Whoa.
That would be nice. And but I think I would rather move on now to some new plans and then try to implement it there because I can't really. I was working for like 2 weeks, so I didn't really count it, but it's really long for this one small plan.
Yes, it is. I was realizing that geometry nodes is extremely powerful. It gives you a full granular control to generate this type of geometry, but at the same time, because it's so low level, you spend a lot of time just building the general architecture to create higher level nodes. I understand 2 weeks. So when you were making these, did you ever come up with a problem with feature creep, for example? Like maybe you were like adding another feature because you thought it might be interesting, or did you have a clear vision from the beginning?
Um, I had the idea to make this drawing option from the beginning. It was like just some pretty eyeballed plant which somehow worked, and I don't even know why it worked, but it worked. Uh, and I was seeing some videos on YouTube. I think there was someone who made something with a drawing input, and when I got help from Shmuel, uh, he had kind of the idea with this drawing option, and I'm pretty in for it. And that's kind of the part which took the most time to get this working.
But once you got that sorted, it was all a piece of cake, I suppose. I like how organized you are with your node trees. It makes it much easier to read. Like here in this flower part, you've separated each part of the flower into its chunks. Very good.
Yeah, that's a unique wonder. The tree before looked like not that good.
No? Yeah, the work in progress usually is a lot messier, no? That's a work in progress prototype.
Yeah, I even arranged it like vertically, like the flower would be, kind of. So the bulb is at the bottom.
Yeah, down
But
here.
I mean, I had a lot of time to do that, so
That's okay, yeah, I sometimes see like a floating disconnected node here and there. That's okay. Man, I like how you have this base mesh generator though. That really helps. It probably takes a lot of the work away because I notice you're using this node many times. Like here, 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 here. You're using it everywhere to create your meshes. So did it take you very long to develop this base mesh generation system, or did Shmuel help you with that as well?
that was actually in the November, and there is I found a tweet from Fletch Graham on Twitter, and he has this toolkit which is called Fletch Nodes, and he had some Bezier curve there, which has a pretty cool debug handle and was pretty visual. And I modified it a bit to my needs and removed the debug handle, and that's how I got to that.
Very cool. Fletch nodes. Are these shared openly as well
I
online?
think it's free. Yes, it was free on Gumroad.
I have to look at those as well, man. So this is testament. Like this is a full-on community project, really. You just bring it all together and make it into a beautiful piece now. A tool set to draw flowers anywhere you want. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for that. So I guess we can open up the panel, I suppose, to other people here. We've got CK, Darren, Shackman, and Slink. And I just wanted to ask you guys, so what do you guys think? Also, just before, what are your plans with this node tree? Do you plan to release these for free or as a product online somewhere, or like make a flower generation toolkit for gardeners elsewhere? What do you plan to do with this?
I'm not totally sure. I think on the long term, I'm gonna make a paid pack when I put in a huge of time. I think that would be the only logic thing to do. But like this particular one is so much community project. I think I gonna release it for free.
From the community for the community.
Kind of.
All right. And just I'm gonna do a quick little experiment. This may break the scene, but like if I apply it, ooh, okay. So it does realize the instance is okay. Yeah, that's one thing I notice is like when I'm working with projects, sometimes having the live geometry nodes inside a full scene is not usually a good idea. So when I'm doing layout, I use the geometry nodes to create the layout, create the props and the assets, and then I apply them and freeze them. Once I've frozen the assets, then I start using them in the actual renders and animation and things. Those geometry nodes can be quite heavy when it comes to the performance every now and then. And they apply perfectly. Work like a charm. Oh, Slink here. I remember Slink, he also released a proximity ground deformation for tree roots, which I thought might be probably mix and match that based on this mesh where you can use the ground would deform around the bulbs of the ground, like actual dirt, as it was pushed up or pushed away. That's another little community thing that you could try maybe work out as well later. So everybody here, what do you guys think?
Very nice, very nice. Thank you for sharing good stuff. Uh, quite impressive.
Super impressive.
Every time I see one of these projects, I know somewhere along the line there was some problem or issue that you ran into that you solved. I mean, this community here is great, and I was just curious if there was a particular problem or issue that you wanted to tell us about that you solved that, I don't know, super elegant or a pain in the butt or was going to be hard but turned out to be super easy, or you thought was going to be easy and turned out to be super hard, or some story in the process of the creation.
Yeah, like the most elegant solutions come from Shmuel, like for the position of the two leaves, there he captures a boolean and then takes that for rotating the other leaf on for 180 degrees. And what I just did is instance them on a 2 point line and make the length very small, and mine was more kind of a workaround. But what I really am proud of is the thing with the resampling, with that it just takes the first and the last points, and you don't really have to draw a curve which has the same curvature like the snowdrop, which would be kind of a not such a nice experience because you kind of have to get it right. And with this resampling on 2 points and then having the handles as sliders to set, I think that's pretty handy.
So the idea that you captured the snowdrop in geometry nodes in a way that the artist wouldn't have to fight with it every time, that the geometry nodes would be able to so help the artist.
Yeah, that's kind of before it was not so easy to draw it, that with this pesky upper leaf which is there for some reason worked pretty good. And with just using these 2 points, it's kind of a bit of a Bob Ross experience, and you make a stroke and there is a flower in no time.
Yeah,
Right on.
instantly. You could also animate the curves as well. Like you could spawn the growth of this flower using the parameters of growth and bending and rotation with its length of the actual curve point to create a sprouting flower as well. Now that everything is procedural, you just animate the parameters. This is extremely powerful for anything.
He said a 4-letter word. He said just animate the parameters.
Jess, no, you could. I mean,
I'll just make a Snowdrop creator 2 weeks later. Oh.
though it's good to know. Like it takes time to understand what the community has, to use what the community has, to adapt it to what you need, based on what you know, to create a tool set that makes it work in the easiest way possible, but at the same time the most flexible way possible. And that I commend you for that. That's you say you spent a long time, but in reality this was very efficient to some degree. Because it's like you're developing a tool set almost. And I know this takes time. And the way you organized is very clear, very clean. It's really nice to walk through the node tree and kind of try to understand what's happening, try to understand how you're doing it. For example, down here you used geometry to instances and then you join them together. These are the two leaves. So you have one leaf and then you have the other leaf. And you're seeing the position of this bendiness. And then you're separating the geometry. And you're joining the instances back together again to translate and scale. So it's interesting to see what type of techniques you're using, especially here with these curve shape. So can you just what does this float curve node do or drive? Does it drive the length or the long length of the leaf, or is it kind of like the profile of the leaf?
It's kind of the profile of the leaf, so you can shape the leaf from 0 to 1.
Very nice.
It takes the factor and then it's kind of don't really looks like the leaf, but depends on how much resolution you have. It will look somehow like leaf.
Yeah, I can see it. Especially like in the almost like blades of grass. You have the central stem, and then it curves outwards to hold its structure. Man, beautiful. I can't wait to see your next flowers, your flower pack. Okay.
Yeah. So I have one question about the naming. I'm not sure about, because I have for the booleans like enable or disable bulb is one option. No bulb would be the shorter option, or just an expression mark like pseudocode would be the shortest option. And no bulb or no flower sounds a little bit stupid. I mean, disable sounds a bit better, but it's also longer and the modifier stack is not huge.
Yeah.
What?
I think for this case, being explicit is kind of nice to show what is on and what is off. So, for example, you can say bulb would be like this, would be 0 or 1. And then before that, I usually write like a line and say no 0. You know, since we don't have like an on-off, sometimes people say off or on. Or you could say false or true. But I like to usually put the name of it where x is this value, and then the other value is y, which is the other value. That's how I usually label it. Or that's what I've noticed from, like, for example, working with Unreal Engine. They use booleans as well, a lot, for parameters and materials and blueprints and things. And the easiest ones that I've found were the ones that actually labeled it like this explicitly. Kind of to show how it works. So for example, yeah, that's how I would do it basically. And then just use your tooltips for extra information. But in this case,
The other way I've seen is bulb parentheses and then the two values. So parentheses would be like show equals 0, comma 1 equals hide.
show
equals 0, comma 1 equals and then hide equals 1. And then that would be in parentheses.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Like this. Similar to that, or with the hyphen there as well?
Yeah, but the idea, I've seen it with brackets too.
Which could be like this.
And then no hyphen, yeah.
Not the little two dots. There we go. Yeah, that makes sense. That's also another method. Yeah, but it's nice to... That's actually a nice tidy way. I like this way as well. Very easy to read. What other labels did you mention that you had difficulty with?
Like it's not really consistent. I think I have somewhere disable written and somewhere I have just written no. And I'm not sure which is the best option.
Makes sense.
Does show hide work for all of the options?
Yeah, if you just, I think it's just being consistent. If you have show and hide, stick to show and hide. If you have no or yes, yes, no, then stick to yes, no. If you have, for example, enable and disable, then stick to enable and disable to make sure it's all the same with all of them.
I would suggest yes, no, or show hide over enable, disable, because if a tool user is like, what does enabling a bulb mean? It doesn't make sense to an artist.
It makes them, yeah, enabling is also could have a concept of like, now the bulb has more power. So yeah, might be misunderstood. But yeah, cool, show hide, yes, no.
Okay, good to know.
Another little thing I recommend is the collections input here that I see. I will just change them to strings instead in the group settings. So I'm in my group settings. Let me just zoom in so you can see this. Where is it? Outputs, inputs, outputs. Petal, I believe. Yeah, so the labels, for example, I will just change this to a string. And when it's in a string, a scale string, where to go? Oh, it hasn't updated, has it? Oh, it's still... Oh, it's the node group, sorry. Here it is. I have to go inside the node group to change it, right? Spline.
I think
Yeah.
outside is for the modifier stack and inside is for this group node.
Gotcha. It's a string. Whoa, I have to like go back out. Yeah, it looks like you've done Inception quite a lot. Way to go. Another quick tip that I find as well is that do you use the Noodler add-on?
Yes, I have it installed, but not too much.
Yeah, a good trick is that, for example, group inputs and outputs, I usually label like inputs are green, outputs are dark red, so that I know what data I'm getting. So this would be green. The problem is the Noodler add-on, I'm not sure if they've updated it, but it needs, when you're inside a group, it doesn't work. It changes the node parent, unfortunately. Damn it. But when I'm building my trees, I try to like use color coding for different types of node groups. That kind of helps sometimes, for especially when you're reading a node tree. When I go inside here, this is an input, this is an input, this is an input. Or you can hide it. Control H. This is another. You can grab another input over here, or you different property inputs, and you can label them with the correct coloring. I noticed that you started to do this, for example, with the second leaf here, which I thought was pretty
They
good.
just tried to match the green to the green of the group node. But what I find very handy is for the nodes which will later be plugged outside to just give them the tick for the color. So the
Mm-hmm.
white nodes will be the inputs I
There you
have
go.
to consider.
Yeah, that's what I do with my trees. That helps me read something. So, for example, with my Painterly project, let's go quickly load it up. Sorry, it's trying to read the hard disk for some reason. Open. Go to my Painterly project. Go to my scenes. Check out my environment node trees with the city library. It's going to take a while to load because I have many trees and many models in there. So 600 megabytes seen already. There we go. If we take a look at my node trees here, now it's going to take a while to compile the shaders as well. Give me a moment. But basically, what I was doing is while I was building my trees, I was also labeling with color to kind of have like a quick overview of what's happening nice and quickly. It might help others to read your trees a bit better in the future. But no, that's fine. It's all good. What else? Still compiling. There it is. Still compiling. I should probably next time pre-compile my scenes a little bit better before going live. But Pleebs, what else you had? Does this answer your question concerning the labeling, or is there another type of label that you should take a look at?
About the booleans, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if the other labels. What do you think about them? Is it kind of true what they say, or should they be called different? It's for me the main hustle to make the labels, so I can understand it and other people can understand it.
I think in general, the way that you're grouping with your sections is good in general. Tell you what, let me just save this scene.
Your tool is also very powerful and easy to use. So things like the labels of the groups, I would not put a lot of concern or energy on. I mean, sure, give it some thought, but the power is in the ability to create, and people will figure out and play with the different sliders in their names. And I guess what I'm saying is, uh, don't spend too much energy on it.
Yeah, don't stress too much. I noticed that you were also adding in tooltips, which I thought was a very good, useful thing to do. So I think you're doing it relatively well and keeping things relatively not too grouped, but grouped enough, keeping your names consistent, and you're good to go. You also need to realize Blender has its limits, right? It doesn't show checkboxes, it doesn't show sub collapsible menus inside the node stack yet. Hopefully they'll work on that later. But there's only so much you can do.
And it doesn't has a trunk node and a branch node and everything like SpeedTree. When I watch SpeedTree videos, that's pretty mind-blowing what they have for tools.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
It would be great to have something similar in Blender someday, but I think it's gonna take a lot more high-level nodes for getting close.
Yes, a lot of high level nodes. Right, here's my node trees, for example. You'll notice that all the green ones are my parameter inputs. And then I use like this orange one. This orange one is like driving the rotation. I'm using oranges for randomization. I'm using the blue ones to get like generate noise height or to get information. And then I'm using this red one and all these purple ones is like the general concept of the whole tree. So I'm like trying to use a little bit of color coding. There's like the support decoration, which is secondary. And then I'm setting everything in red. Realizing it's just setting the material, drawing the objects, and then setting everything else here. The view is in bright red. I use a little bit of color coding so that at a glance. I'm also, for example, I get the object data in the orange color, I get collection info in the white color, things like that. So it's kind of quick and easy sometimes. Get the instance here in the green side white. So that's what I do just for my tree organizations a little bit so that I can go back to it and I can kind of read what's happening relatively quickly, not just in the node groups. See, this one's not very polished. Here's this more simple tree. But cool, excellent. So I guess I'm gonna leave it here. So our recommendation is use strings for the line separation instead of collections. And also don't stress too much about it. Be consistent with your Boolean nomenclature. So stick to one. Just stick to one. Don't stress too much about it. There are limits in the way the modifier stack can be presented, right? So be consistent with booleans. You're doing great with the tooltips. And in general, you're doing great with the frames, legibility of the trees, the colors as well. Maybe, and also, maybe you can color your nodes too for some legibility also. My other quick is like every now and then clean up the floating nodes, especially if you think to share it. So there is a lot of like stray nodes that I saw, and also use the period, whoops, in the name of the node group to hide it from the add menu and asset browser, for example. And then you're good to go. So for example, you have a lot of nested node groups. So if somebody was looking at the menu that you created, there are like 20 different node groups. Some of them are repeated. If you don't want to show them in the add menu and you just want them to add the top level, node group that you created. Then just label all of the sub node groups with a period, so that in the end you don't see anything. You only see the top level node group, which would be this one here, the mod stack. So everything else would have a period, would hide away this ETK random value vector by Arundel that could be hidden. The node groups for the generation of the base meshes, those could be hidden as well. The other ones for the bending that you have up here, the displacement node, you don't need that one as well. You can hide that one. You could also hide the radial array one. You don't need that one either. And little by little, in the add menu here, you can see that this menu here is slowly but surely becoming a lot smaller, so that when a person goes digging or using the assets from the scene or using the assets from the asset browser, you can just it keeps things nice, clean and tidy and minimal when people start digging for information. So let's find the node groups. Where are they? Node trees. So you can see that all the ones with the dots, they would be listed in the top, and then you have another list of things down below that don't have the dots. So it's like a quick way. It's like, okay, so I'm only going to mark the Galanthus leaf cluster, mark as an asset, and that's it. I'm going to mark the other snowdrop one as a mod stack and mark as an asset, and you're good to go, for example. But these ones here, they wouldn't even show in the add menu. If I append the scene, for example, up here with the node groups, or I append the objects and everything has all of the node groups, in the add menu, I won't see them. And that's it, really. You use the period in the name of node groups to hide it from the add menu to keep the scene tidy. Because Blender is messy, so it can be very messy very quickly. So that's one thing I noticed when production is when I tried to use my city generation in other scenes, it was extremely difficult to translate one thing to another. So sometimes, for example, instead of actually like putting the node groups and then asset groups, I would actually mark the actual collection as an asset. When I mark the collection as an asset, then it's a little bit easier to link it, and then I can override it with the settings and create new node trees and new scenes without a problem. So as long as you're clear what is your high level and what is your low level, and what low level nodes or mid level nodes don't need to be shared between projects, and just the high level user experience or collection that you want to share with other people, that's the thing that you'd be marking in the asset browser. And if it doesn't crash, hopefully, because collections is still pretty buggy. But does it make sense? I hope it helps.
Yeah, this helps a lot. Thanks a lot.
So you're doing good. I love your work. I can't wait for your next flowers, and thank you for being here for this interview today. And also for telling us about your inspiration. And it's kind of cool that you got into 3D after doing gardening, and that you bring in the gardening to the 3D, because that's really beautiful. I love that origin story. I hope to see your flowers again soon.
Yeah, I will continue. Thanks a lot for your time.
All right. So everyone here, thanks for hanging out here till the end. I'm going to wrap this up now. We will be here next week, same time, same place. I still don't know what the topic is yet, but if you want your art to be looked at or reviewed, or if you'd like to star or have like some questions, an open panel where we can ask you anything about your art or your techniques or your node trees, feel free to get in touch with me here in Arundel's Discord server, and I will put you in the queue. And also, hopefully next week I'll give you guys some animatic updates with the Painterly project. So, thanks for your time, and I will see you guys next week.